Learning anatomy is tedious and boring. Unless, like me, you have a real interest in learning how muscles work, it's really not for everyone. So I find a good way to actually start learning anatomy is by figuring out just the proportions and then using a mannequin based on those proportions. Again, this can be applied to human anatomy as well as vehicles, but for this video, I'm gonna stick to human anatomy. A great way to start learning about the human body is the ability to simplify it. This not only makes you deal with less problems to solve, it is also considerably faster when doing concept art or illustration, as half of the time you won't even have to draw or paint any visible anatomy. It is important when learning that you find a fixed mannequin that you are most comfortable with. This will highly depend on your familiarity with perspective and shapes, but it will help you immensely. So here's a couple of options I find a very good start. The Loomis mannequin is extremely useful because it puts a lot of emphasis on gesture, something that in a later stage of your development will become extremely useful. The beauty of this mannequin is that it's also very forgiving when making perspective mistakes, because the shapes are more organic and very simple. This makes it a great mannequin for gesture drawing. Some pitfalls though is that this mannequin doesn't really show a lot of volume in the limbs, as it is often referred to as the skeleton mannequin because you're only drawing the bones for the limbs. This might hinder you in a later stage when you want to slap on some anatomy or start shading the figure, but again, it's a really good mannequin to start with. A great second alternative is the ovoid mannequin, something I picked up at the Watts Atelier. The ovoid mannequin is brilliant due to its simplicity while still portraying all human landmarks and volumes. This mannequin will require some more perspective knowledge, especially for cylinders, but it is very user-friendly. Definitely give this one a try before deciding on your mannequin of choice. A more complicated option might be Michael Hampton's mannequin. At least that's whom I picked it up from. This mannequin will be much harder to figure out if you're still struggling with perspective, or even organic forms. However, it provides a beautiful leeway into anatomy and shading. That's because this mannequin simplifies individual muscles into their most rudimentary geometric shapes instead of just the entire body. In fact, you can create some pretty convincing looking characters just studying the Hamptons book. Keep in mind that this mannequin builds upon the previous mannequins instead of being a unique one in nature. Getting a good grasp on the previous two will offer a far smoother transition into this mannequin. Notice here how I'm drawing the individual muscle groups as described by Michael Hampton to construct believable anatomy without actually knowing all too much about musculature. If you feel really adventurous, you can check out George Bridgman. There's no denying that Bridgman has created one of the most genius and influential books explaining the human figure in simplifying shapes. However, Bridgman is extremely complicated. He's extremely useful for design and he creates very interesting shapes and flow for the body parts. He also wedges them together in a beautiful and harmonious way. But in my opinion, this is no book for beginners. So if you are an absolute beginner, glance over it, but don't study from it just yet. All these mannequins are very powerful tools for an artist, but don't feel limited by them. For instance, I really like to combine a lot of these mannequins in my figure invention. I will use the Loomis method for the upper torso, rely more on Hampton for structure, and throw in some Bridgman from time to time when I feel confident. So training all mannequin types is definitely good. I just advise you to focus on one at a time, especially early in your development, so that once you are confident with one, transitioning to the other will be much easier. Now eventually you're gonna want to learn some actual anatomy as well. Knowing basic shapes is fine, but you will always wonder why these shapes are constructed the way they are. And the answer lies in the real deal, of course. Knowing anatomy will add more believability to your designs and ease the process at the same time. There are many anatomy books available, so you can't really go wrong. However, when it comes to a nice symbiosis between anatomy and the application thereof, the book Anatomy for Sculptors is my favorite. You get all the necessary information regarding superficial muscles and bones, and as a very big bonus, they're also shown in motion, which is often not the case in very dry medical anatomy books. Alright guys, so just to recap, start by simplifying your figure first, okay? Get the hang of drawing your proportions correctly in perspective and get a feel for volume first. Then transition into more complex shapes as illustrated by Michael Hampton, okay? So do it step by step, do not overcomplicate things. And then afterwards, when studying anatomy, be honest about where you are in your development and study muscle groups in depth according to that level. Don't overcomplicate things too much, anatomy will be a lifelong study anyway. A good way to tackle anatomy going forward is study a particular muscle group and only that muscle group. For instance, study the muscles of the arm or even just the upper arm. Then, when drawing your mannequin, give the part that you studied just a bit more attention. Try to indicate some muscles, but only the muscle you just studied. Fill at least 20 pages with studies of one muscle group at a time until you've covered the entire body. If you're a complete beginner, don't tackle too many muscle groups at once. If you're a bit more advanced, try to combine what you can, but don't put on too much. In my current development, I still switch between upper and lower body or posterior or anterior. I rarely tackle the entire human body at the same time. Remember, studying won't always be fun, but this template might make it more enjoyable as you are already creating convincing figures using the mannequin method, and applying anatomy on top is just a bonus. Also, don't feel alarmed that you forget muscle groups you've just studied. It's completely natural and it only means you're engaging your brain to handle larger tasks. You will retain a lot more than you think once you restudy what you've learned prior. And trust me, we all have to restudy. I don't think that will ever stop. Fortunately, this video will. So I thank you all for watching, and I probably won't make another video before the end of the year. So I wish you guys all the best for the holidays, and I'll see you next year. Bye bye.